Saturday mornings in the 1970s meant one thing: cartoons. You'd wake up early, pour yourself a bowl of the sugariest cereal you could find, and park yourself in front of the television for hours. The networks gave us Scooby-Doo, Super Friends, and plenty of other shows we still remember. But they also gave us some truly bizarre cartoons that seemed designed by committee, rushed into production to cash in on whatever was popular that week. These shows were cheesy, formulaic, and often completely ridiculous, and somehow we loved them anyway. Here are the top 10 cheesiest 1970s cartoons you forgot. Number 10. Jabberjaw, 1976 to 1978. In 1975, Jaws became one of the biggest movies ever made. America developed an obsession with sharks. Hanna-Barbera, never ones to miss a trend, decided to capitalize on this by creating Jabberjaw, a cartoon about a talking great white shark who played drums in a rock band. The show was set in the year 2076, where humans lived in underwater cities protected by biodomes. Jabberjaw was a 15-foot amphibious shark who could walk, talk, and somehow breathe air. He was the drummer for the Neptunes, a rock band consisting of 4 teenagers: Biff on lead guitar, Shelly on tambourine, Bubbles on keyboard, and Clamhead on bass. The band traveled from gig to gig, solving mysteries and battling villains who wanted to conquer the undersea world. Jabberjaw was voiced by Frank Welker, who based the character's voice on Curly Howard from The Three Stooges. The shark constantly complained about getting no respect, borrowing Rodney Dangerfield's famous catchphrase. Every time Jabberjaw tried to help, something went wrong. Every time he entered a building, shark ejector robots would toss him out. And every time Shelly got annoyed with him, which was often, she'd call him names like Blubberhead, Dum-Dum, or Jabber-Blubber. The formula was pure Scooby-Doo. The band would arrive at a new underwater city for a concert. They'd encounter a villain with a scheme. There would be chase scenes set to music. Jabberjaw would accidentally save the day. Then everyone would praise him, except Shelly, who'd immediately go back to insulting him. Like the ocean locations, everything in the show was aqua-themed puns. Aqualaska instead of Alaska. Plaza Aquapulco instead of Acapulco. Aquamo instead of Eskimo. The writers seemed to think adding aqua to any word made it underwater appropriate. The show lasted 16 episodes, airing from September 11th, 1976 to December 18th, 1976 on ABC. ABC kept it in reruns until September 3rd, 1978. Despite the short run, Jabberjaw became one of Hanna-Barbera's more memorable characters. He appeared as a referee on Laugh Olympics and made cameo appearances in other shows for decades afterward. In 2011, he even showed up in Scooby-Doo, Mystery Incorporated, proving that some cheesy cartoons never truly disappear. Number 9. The Great Grape Ape Show, 1975 to 1978. Sometimes a cartoon premise is so simple, it sounds like something a child made up. The Great Grape Ape Show was exactly that. A 40-foot-tall purple gorilla named Grape Ape roamed the countryside with his dog sidekick Beagle, generally terrifying everyone they encountered. Grape Ape had the intelligence of a small child and couldn't control his enormous strength. When he sneezed, hurricane-force winds would destroy everything nearby. When he cried, floods would wipe out entire areas. When he walked, buildings shook. But Grape Ape was always apologetic, offering his catchphrase, "Grape Ape, Grape Ape," or his famous, "I'm sorry," after accidentally causing massive destruction. The show aired as part of ABC's Saturday morning lineup starting in September 1975. Each episode followed the same pattern. Grape Ape and Beagle would arrive somewhere new. Grape Ape's size would cause chaos. People would panic. Eventually, everyone would realize Grape Ape was friendly. Then he'd accidentally destroy something else, apologize, and they'd move on to the next town. Beagle, voiced by Marty Ingalls, was the straight man to Grape Ape's childlike antics. He spent most of his time trying to keep Grape Ape out of trouble and failing spectacularly. The dynamic was similar to Lenny and George from Of Mice and Men, except aimed at children and featuring a giant purple ape instead of a mentally challenged ranch hand. The iconic image of Grape Ape riding on top of Beagle's yellow van became one of the show's most memorable visuals. How a 40-foot ape fit on top of a van was never explained. Physics didn't matter in 1970s cartoons. The show ran for 16 episodes during its original run, but remained on ABC's schedule through April 1978, thanks to constant reruns. Grape Ape later appeared in guest spots on Yogi's Space Race and as a competitor on Laugh Olympics. Like many Hanna-Barbera characters, he became part of the studio's extended universe, showing up whenever they needed to fill background crowd scenes. Critics called The Great Grape Ape Show one of the most idiotic cartoons of the decade. They weren't wrong, but that didn't stop kids from loving it. There was something endearing about a giant purple ape who just wanted to be friends but kept accidentally destroying everything he touched. Number 8. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kids, 1973. In 1969, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid became one of the biggest westerns ever made, starring Paul Newman and Robert Redford. 4 years later, Hanna-Barbera created a Saturday morning cartoon with an almost identical title. But instead of outlaws in the Old West, this version featured a teenage rock band who worked as secret agents. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kids aired on NBC from September to December 1973. The show had absolutely nothing to do with the film. Butch Cassidy was the lead singer and guitarist of a pop group called the Sundance Kids. The other band members were Marilee on tambourine, Stephanie, nicknamed Steffi, on bass guitar, and Wally on drums, along with Wally's dog Elvis. By day, they toured the world as rock stars. By night, they were undercover agents working for the government, solving crimes and foiling international villains. Their handler was Mr. Socrates, a supercomputer who was violently allergic to dogs. Every time the team met with Mr. Socrates for their next mission, Elvis was supposed to stay outside. But through his own cleverness, or Wally's forgetfulness, Elvis always ended up inside the lair. Mr. Socrates would start sneezing uncontrollably, short circuit, and send the team scrambling out to their assignment. This happened in every single episode, without variation. Butch wore a special ring with a hidden communicator that let him stay in contact with Mr. Socrates during missions. He was designated Sundance 1, which sounded vaguely spy-like, but mostly served to remind viewers this was a secret agent show. The character of Butch was clearly modeled on David Cassidy from the Partridge Family, who was one of the biggest teen idols of the era. The voice actor was Lloyd "Chip" Hand 2, but he sounded nothing like David Cassidy. Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees voiced Wally, which gave the show some legitimate music industry credibility, even though the Monkees had broken up years earlier. The show followed the same Scooby-Doo formula that Hanna-Barbera used for most of their 1970s output. The band would arrive at a new exotic location for a concert. They'd discover a villain with an evil scheme. There would be chase scenes set to music performed by the Sundance Kids. Eventually, they'd catch the bad guy and perform their concert as planned. Only 13 episodes were produced, and NBC didn't renew it for a second season. The show disappeared into obscurity almost immediately. Even adding an S to the title to avoid legal issues with the film couldn't save it. Decades later, characters from the show made ironic appearances on Adult Swim's C-Lab 2021, introducing Butch Cassidy to a new generation who had no memory of the original. Number 7. Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels, 1977 to 1980. By the late 1970s, Hanna-Barbera had perfected their formula. Take 3 attractive teenage detectives, add a bizarre sidekick who causes as many problems as he solves, send them around the world solving mysteries, and repeat weekly. Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels followed this formula precisely. The show premiered on ABC in September 1977. 3 teenage girls, Brenda, Dee Dee, and Taffy, discovered Captain Caveman frozen in a block of ice during an archaeological expedition. After thawing him out, the prehistoric superhero joined their mystery-solving team. Captain Caveman became their bizarre, nearly incomprehensible sidekick who wielded a magic club and could fly, sort of. Captain Caveman was voiced by Mel Blanc, using a variation of his Barney Rubble voice mixed with incomprehensible caveman grunts. His catchphrase was, Captain Caavemaaavan, screamed at full volume, usually while leaping into action with his club raised overhead. His club was essentially a magic wand that could produce anything the plot required. A rope, a parachute, a jackhammer, whatever was needed at that moment. The problem was that Captain Caveman was often more hindrance than help. He'd eat important clues. His flying club would malfunction mid-air, sending him crashing to the ground. He'd mistake innocent bystanders for villains and attack them. The Teen Angels spent as much time managing Captain Caveman as they did solving mysteries. Each episode followed the standard Hanna-Barbera mystery format. The group would encounter a crime or a villain with a scheme. There would be investigation scenes where they'd find clues. Captain Caveman would cause chaos. Eventually, they'd unmask the villain, who was usually someone they'd met earlier in the episode, disguised as a monster or ghost. The show originally ran as segments on Scooby's All-Star Laugh Olympics before getting its own standalone time slot. It lasted 40 episodes across 3 seasons, ending in June 1980. Captain Caveman proved popular enough that he continued appearing in other Hanna-Barbera productions throughout the 1980s and 90s. Looking back, Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels was pure cheese. The mysteries were predictable. The animation was limited even by 1970s standards. Captain Caveman's voice was borderline incomprehensible. But Mel Blanc's vocal performance and the show's self-aware silliness gave it charm that many more polished cartoons lacked. Number 6. Inch High, Private Eye, 1973. Get Smart was one of the most popular spy comedies on television in the late 1960s. In 1973, Hanna-Barbera decided to create an animated version, but with a twist. What if Maxwell Smart was only 1 inch tall? Inch High, Private Eye followed the adventures of Inch High, a detective who could shrink himself down to 1 inch in height by drinking a special formula. With his niece Lori, his muscle-bound nephew Gator, and his loyal dog Braveheart, Inch High solved crimes by using his tiny size to sneak into places regular-sized detectives couldn't reach. The show aired on NBC from September to December 1973 as part of their Saturday morning lineup. Each episode began with Inch High receiving a case from his boss, Mr. Finkerton, usually involving a theft or a mysterious disappearance. Inch would drink his shrinking formula, become 1 inch tall, and set out to investigate. His small size allowed him to hide in pockets, crawl through air vents, and overhear conversations that villains thought were private. Of course, being 1 inch tall also created constant problems. Inch would almost get stepped on. He'd nearly get washed down drains. House pets would mistake him for a toy. The show played these dangers for comedy, with Inch narrowly escaping death in increasingly ridiculous ways. The voice cast included Lenny Weinrib as Inch High, who gave the character a high-pitched voice that matched his tiny stature. John Stevenson voiced Mr. Finkerton, and Kathy Gorey voiced Lori. The animation was typical early 1970s Hanna-Barbera, meaning limited movement and lots of recycled backgrounds. Only 13 episodes were produced. NBC didn't renew it for a second season, and the show quickly vanished from television. Unlike Scooby-Doo or the Flintstones, Inch High never achieved lasting popularity. He didn't appear in other Hanna-Barbera crossovers. No merchandise was produced. The show simply aired its 13 episodes and disappeared. Critics at the time praised Inch High, Private Eye for being more original than the endless Scooby-Doo clones flooding Saturday mornings. At least this show had a unique premise, rather than just another group of teenagers unmasking fake ghosts. But originality wasn't enough to save it. The shrinking detective concept was too one-note to sustain a series, and by 1974, Inch High was forgotten. Number 5. Goober and the Ghostchasers, 1973 to 1975. In 1969, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Became a massive hit for CBS. Hanna-Barbera spent the next decade trying to recapture that magic by creating variations on the same formula. Goober and the Ghostchasers was one of the most shameless Scooby-Doo ripoffs they ever produced. The show premiered on ABC in September 1973. The premise was nearly identical to Scooby-Doo. A group of teenagers traveled around solving mysteries involving supposedly supernatural occurrences. Instead of a talking Great Dane, they had Goober, a dog who could turn invisible when he got scared. The human characters were Ted, Jilly, and Tina, teenage reporters for Ghostchasers magazine. They investigated paranormal activity for their publication, usually discovering that the ghosts were actually criminals in disguise. Goober accompanied them on these investigations, turning invisible at the worst possible moments and causing chaos the rest of the time. Goober was voiced by Paul Winchell, who gave the dog a cowardly personality similar to Scooby-Doo, but without any of the charm. When Goober got frightened, which was constantly, he'd turn invisible. This would have been useful, except that Goober couldn't control when he became visible again. He'd reappear at exactly the wrong time, alerting villains to the gang's presence, or accidentally revealing their hiding spots. The show lasted only 16 episodes across 2 seasons. ABC kept it on the schedule until September 1975 through constant reruns. During its brief run, Goober and the Ghostchasers crossed over with Scooby-Doo in an episode called The Phantom of the Country Music Hall. The two dogs met, solved a mystery together, and proved that Hanna-Barbera had essentially created the same character twice with slightly different gimmicks. Even by 1970s standards, Goober and the Ghostchasers was considered derivative and uninspired. The mysteries were predictable. The characters had no personality beyond basic archetypes. Goober's invisibility power was poorly utilized and often ignored when inconvenient to the plot. The show disappeared from television and, unlike Scooby-Doo, never returned in reruns or revivals. For years, Goober was considered one of Hanna-Barbera's most forgotten characters. He made no guest appearances in other shows. No merchandise featured him. The character simply vanished as if he'd turned invisible permanently. Number 4. The Funky Phantom, 1971 to 1972. The success of Scooby-Doo inspired countless imitations throughout the 1970s. The Funky Phantom took the mystery-solving teenagers formula and added a Revolutionary War ghost and his ghostly cat. The show premiered on ABC in September 1971. 3 teenagers, Skip, April, and Augie, plus Augie's dog Elmo, accidentally released Mudsie, the ghost of a Revolutionary War patriot who'd been hiding in a grandfather clock for 200 years. Mudsie and his ghostly cat Boo emerged grateful for their freedom and decided to join the kids on their adventures, solving mysteries around the United States. Mudsie was voiced by Dawes Butler, who gave the ghost a cowardly personality despite his patriotic bluster. Mudsie would boast about his bravery and revolutionary spirit, then immediately panic when actual danger appeared. Boo the cat was even more cowardly, spending most of his time hiding or running away. For ghosts, they spent surprisingly little time being scary, and a lot of time being scared. The show followed the now standard Hanna-Barbera formula. The gang would arrive at a new location. They'd encounter a mystery involving ghosts, monsters, or criminals. Mudsie and Boo would provide comic relief while occasionally helping solve the case. Eventually, they'd unmask the villain, who was always a normal person in a costume. Only 17 episodes were produced during the 1971 to 1972 season. ABC didn't renew it, and the Funky Phantom disappeared from Saturday mornings. The show was exactly what audiences expected from Hanna-Barbera in 1971. Formulaic, predictable, and reliant on characters who were variations of personalities they'd seen before. What set the Funky Phantom apart, if anything, was its attempt to blend American history with the mystery genre. Mudsie would occasionally reference the Revolutionary War or famous historical figures from his era. These moments were meant to be educational, teaching kids about American history while entertaining them. In practice, they were usually just set up for jokes about how much the world had changed since the 1770s. The Funky Phantom has been largely forgotten, overshadowed by Scooby-Doo, and even by other Hanna-Barbera mystery shows like Jabberjaw and Goober. It received no revival, no reboot, no nostalgic comeback. Muddsy and his friends solved their mysteries and faded into obscurity. Number 3. The Amazing Chan Clan, 1972. Charlie Chan was a fictional Chinese-American detective created in the 1920s who appeared in dozens of films from the 1930s through the 1940s. These films were controversial even in their time because Charlie Chan was always played by white actors in yellowface. In 1972, Hanna-Barbera decided to create a cartoon version featuring Charlie Chan's children. The Amazing Chan Clan premiered on CBS in September 1972. The show featured Detective Charlie Chan and his 10 children traveling around the world in a van, solving mysteries as a family. The children formed a rock band because every Hanna-Barbera show in the 1970s needed to feature a rock band performing chase scene music. The Chan children were Henry, Stanley, Susie, Alan, Ann, Tom, Flip, Nancy, Mimi, and Scooter. Charlie Chan was voiced by Key Luke, who was actually Chinese-American and had played Charlie Chan's #1 son in several 1930s films. Jodie Foster, just 9 years old at the time, voiced Ann Chan. It was one of her earliest professional roles. Each episode followed the mystery formula. The Chan family would arrive at a new location. They'd encounter a crime or a villain's scheme. Charlie would assign his children various tasks to investigate. Eventually, they'd solve the case through teamwork, with Charlie providing wisdom and deductive reasoning at the end. The show attempted to be more culturally respectful than the old Charlie Chan films, but it still relied on stereotypes and outdated depictions of Asian culture. Charlie spoke in fortune cookie wisdom, offering proverbs that were meant to sound profound, but often came across as nonsensical. The children were portrayed more naturally, but they were still defined primarily by being Charlie Chan's kids, rather than having distinct personalities. The Amazing Chan Clan lasted only 16 episodes before CBS canceled it. The show was criticized for perpetuating stereotypes, even as it tried to move away from them. Modern viewers watching the show are often shocked by how casually it handles cultural representation. Despite its problems, The Amazing Chan Clan was notable for being the first Saturday morning cartoon to feature a predominantly Asian American cast. That representation, flawed as it was, mattered to Asian American children who rarely saw themselves in cartoons. The show has been largely forgotten, but it represents an important, if imperfect, step toward diversity in children's programming. Number 2. Speed Buggy, 1973 to 1978. What if the cowardly sidekick from Scooby-Doo was a sentient dune buggy instead of a dog? Speed Buggy answered that question, premiering on CBS in September 1973 with voice work by Mel Blanc. The show featured 3 teenagers, Tinker, Mark, and Debbie, who raced Speed Buggy around the world while solving mysteries, always encountering villains trying to sabotage races or steal the car's secrets. Speed Buggy's personality mirrored Scooby-Doo perfectly. Cowardly but loyal, panicking at danger, yet always coming through when needed. His catchphrase, "Vroom vroom," conveyed emotion through car noises. The concept of a dune buggy with feelings was absurd, but kids didn't care about realism on Saturday mornings. The show ran for 16 original episodes from September 8th to December 22nd, 1973, then aired reruns from February 4th, 1978 to September 2nd, 1978. It was popular enough to earn guest spots on Laugh Olympics and Scooby's All-Stars. Speed Buggy perfectly captured 1970s cartoon cheese, a shameless Scooby-Doo formula clone with limited animation and repetitive plots, yet somehow entertaining. Number 1. The New Adventures of Gilligan, 1974 to 1977. Gilligan's Island was one of the most popular sitcoms of the 1960s. When it ended in 1967, fans wanted more adventures of the 7 stranded castaways. In 1974, Filmation produced an animated version that brought the characters back for more island misadventures. The New Adventures of Gilligan premiered on ABC in September 1974. Most of the original cast returned to voice their animated counterparts. Bob Denver voiced Gilligan, Alan Hale Jr. voiced the skipper, Jim Backus and Natalie Schaefer returned as Thurston and Lovey Howell. Russell Johnson voiced the professor. Tina Louise, who played Ginger in the original live-action series, did not participate in the animated version. Jane Webb voiced the animated Ginger instead. The animated version gave Gilligan a pet monkey named Stubby because apparently being stranded on an island with 7 other people wasn't enough chaos. Stubby joined Gilligan in causing disasters that prevented the castaways from being rescued. Every episode featured a new scheme to get off the island that inevitably failed, usually because of something Gilligan did. The show's plots were recycled from the original live-action series. The castaways would build a raft, but it would sink. Someone would visit the island, but they'd leave before the castaways could get rescued. The Howells would try to establish an elitist resort on the island, causing class warfare among the group. These were stories viewers had seen before, just animated and simplified for children. The New Adventures of Gilligan lasted 24 episodes across 2 seasons. ABC kept it on their schedule through September 1977, filling time slots with constant reruns. In 1982, Filmation produced a sequel series called Gilligan's Planet, where the castaways got stranded on an alien planet instead of a tropical island. That show lasted even fewer episodes. The animated Gilligan's Island proved that not every beloved sitcom needed to be turned into a cartoon. The charm of the original show came from the actors' performances and the chemistry between cast members. Animation removed that element, leaving only the basic premise and familiar character types. Kids who'd never seen the original show might have enjoyed it, but for anyone who remembered the 1960s series, The New Adventures of Gilligan felt like a pale imitation. The show is mostly remembered today as a curiosity, an example of how every successful property in the 1970s got an animated version whether it made sense or not. Gilligan's Island worked as a sitcom. As a cartoon, it lost what made it special. The 1970s gave us some of the greatest cartoons ever made, but it also gave us dozens of cheap imitations, formulaic mysteries, and bizarre concepts that seemed destined to fail. These cheesy cartoons filled Saturday morning schedules, gave animators steady work, and somehow entertained millions of children despite their obvious flaws. Looking back, there's something charming about that era's willingness to try anything. Networks would greenlight shows about talking sharks, invisible dogs, inch-tall detectives, and caveman superheroes without worrying whether the concepts made sense. If something was popular, they'd create 5 variations of it. If something wasn't popular, they'd cancel it after 13 episodes and try something else. Most of these shows have been forgotten, replaced by more sophisticated animation and better storytelling. But for those of us who watch them every Saturday morning, they remain part of our childhood memories. They were cheesy, yes. Formulaic, absolutely. But they were ours. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more fascinating stories.